Hello, welcome back to A Course in Miracles 365, Awakening to Love. Very good. Thank you so much for joining me here. And thank you to all of you who have recently subscribed to and tuned in to my own personal YouTube channel. And if you're watching from Enlightened World Network's YouTube channel, welcome again. And well, they would certainly appreciate if you subscribed to Enlightened World Network's channel, if you don't already. On that channel, you will see a multiplicity of spiritual themed playlists. This is only one of them. And if you've tuned in from there, I appreciate that. Thank you. So if you haven't seen me before, I'm Reverend Tomas Garza, and the 30-second history of this video series is that it began a year and a half ago, in January of 2021, as a live stream on Enlightened World Network, and now we offer this content both on my personal YouTube channel and Enlightened World Network in a pre-recorded form to reach more people, number one, and for a more authentic delivery, which is completely for you, the viewer. I love not having to scroll my phone to respond to the live comments, that sort of thing. So we can keep the focus where it belongs, which is what spiritual practice is all about anyway, isn't it? We're in a section of the course known as the Manual for Teachers. If you're brand new to this, there are three primary sections to A Course in Miracles. One is the text, two, the workbook for students, and the third is the Manual for Teachers, which you begin with if you're curious about this course, is entirely up to you. I will say that many people find that it's better for them, not everyone, but many people find that it's a better experience for them and they integrate the material better if they start with the workbook lessons, which we've covered here in this video series. The text to many people can seem rather esoteric, rather out there and abstract, and it is more abstract than the workbook lessons. So, food for thought. You could also start with this manual, which is a spiritual themed, frequently asked questions section. It is. It's like an FAQ section on a website. So having begun this, we're moving forward with question number 5 today, which is a great topic. How is healing accomplished? How about that? How is healing accomplished? Well, I invite you to take 30 seconds, take a minute, however you do this today, and think about how you view healing. There's a lot of information, isn't there? There's a lot of info. There are a lot of channels, there are a lot of practitioners out there in the spiritual marketplace because, well, let's just be completely honest, it is that, is it not? There are a number of people that talk about healing. So, quick question for you to think about on your own. What is healing to you? How do you define it? What does it constitute? What does it involve? And I invite you to think about that. As you will find as a student of A Course in Miracles, the course itself has vastly different takes, vastly different definitions of things like healing and forgiveness. In fact, the purpose of this course is to turn our perception completely around. to turn it on its head, as it were, and present a thought system that is 180 degrees the opposite of the world's thought system. It is a completely different way of looking at everything, leaving absolutely no stone unturned in its totality. This is why the Course works, and let me just say, it's also why so many people start it and stop it and decide that it's not for them. Whatever your situation is what it is. This is a presentation of what Jesus refers to as the universal course, which is our awakening. There are many different doors. This may or may not be your door. What I mean by doors, it's an analogy that I find really helpful. I like it, so I use it, because there are many different approaches. There are many different doors. These come in many forms, including the major world religions, including more, well, obscure or less practiced religious traditions, spiritual traditions, all forms of spirituality. There are many, many of them, aren't there? There are many doors because there are, well, so it appears, many different people. There are in the world, apparently, and I stress, apparently, many of us. So there are many approaches to what is inside. You can analogize this to what's inside the building or the container only. Of course, there ultimately is no container. However, there are many ways to approach truth. We're selecting one or two or 27 that speak to us here in the world. This, being A Course in Miracles, is but one. So, before we delve into how is healing accomplished, note that I will say things that you don't agree with here. And if you do agree with them, you still may find them puzzling or troubling on some level. And if you do, good. Consider that that was meant to happen. Consider if it's an outright rejection of what I have to say, which isn't me, Reverend Tomas Garza. It's what Jesus has to say, by the way. He dictated the course, not me, not my dog, not anyone else. He did. So it's his course. You can choose to accept, reject, or question anything that you want. How is healing accomplished? It is not accomplished until you realize one thing, that healing is not of the body. It is not of the physical body. This 80% water compound structure of, well, 80% water, flesh, bone. We call this a chin. We call this a bottom lip. Right? We call this shiny thing right here a forehead. Healing is not of the body. It is truly not possible to heal until we accept this. If you've done the workbook, you will notice lessons 201 through 220. Specifically, I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me. Think about, if you have not, why Jesus would present that for 20 consecutive lessons. It's the same reason why we repeat anything, why anything is repeated to us, so that the 579th time we hear the same thing, we may actually begin to entertain the idea. And in the 727th time that we hear it, we may actually begin to understand it. And in the 974th time, we may actually begin to put it into practice, which is what this course is all about, is not just understanding something intellectually, but applying it, doing it, applying it so that you may learn from your own experience. This is where the action lies. In common parlance, it's where it's at. It is. It's where it's at in the application of these ideas. Therefore, we repeat ourselves. And we quickly discover, no matter what your spiritual path looks like, that there's no room for this common attitude of, that's so yesterday, or oh, this is old. I've seen this before. Quickly discover the childishness of that attitude, and that it is born 100% out of fear. Fear of what? Our own awakening. Healing is of the mind. Now, there are many ways that you can think about this, but until we accept this, healing is not possible, because you're seeking to heal something that cannot be actually healed with the same thought system that created the problem. We tend to think of healing as the physical body first, exclusively in some cases. Well, healing is of the mind. It is the mind that runs the physical body, not the other way around, as we often see it in the world. So I invite you to consider, having thought that a physical symptom dictates how you behave and what you think about, because in the world, it seems to do that, doesn't it? We feel an ache or pain, and then we feel sad or angry or depressed. Well, we could choose differently right here in the present moment. Everything that we're currently experiencing, and I realize that some of you may be experiencing some very painful, very chronic conditions. What we're saying here is not to minimize that. However, it's to teach and to illustrate a point. I'm sharing A Course in Miracles here, that everything that we're currently experiencing is the result of a choice that we have made. Spirituality, as I know you know, is about adult ownership, taking responsibility for running the show. Because we do, you run the show. Now, you could choose to run and hide, and that's what happens in the world. People become afraid of all kinds of things, and they run and they hide. They just do. That's how it happens. So in comes the presentation of spiritual traditions, practices such as this one, where the intent is to have us shift our perception. Sickness is a form of hiding. As such, it's fear-based. What we're enjoined to do and invited to do in this course is to accept truth just as it is. The idea that we are not a physical body and that healing is 100% of the mind goes quite a long way toward undoing our faulty perception here in the world. It's simply a mistake to think that this 80% water thing runs the show. It doesn't run the show. It does what the mind instructs it to do. It is a communication device. I'm using it right now, but what you're really seeing is an image on your screen. Literally, this is YouTube. You see an image that is projected on your screen. You hear sounds that are somehow by a technological process that I have absolutely no idea how it works. You're hearing what we call sounds that appear to be coming from, well, my body. And it's an image on the screen. So, why, you may ask, do we want to keep and protect sickness? Well, it's fear. It's fear of our own power, fear of our own will, which is the will of God. They are one and the same. It's our fear of the light. It's our fear of awakening, ultimately, deep down. So, because this is so ingrained and is so strong, we need to most often approach things gradually. We need something like this course, which is a self-study course where one takes what you want at any given time, really, what you elect. And I know that a number of you have been students of this course longer than I have in this lifetime. You've devoted decades of your life to this, so you will know that delving back into this material down the line is quite like watching a movie a second time or a 12th time, or reading your favorite novel. You always pick out something different. And it's quite common for people to go through any section of this course a second time or a third time or a 75th time and note things that they didn't even notice before. The language is exactly the same. You're not. On the level of form, you're not, because you've had a certain number of experiences in between, and you're noticing what you're supposed to notice right now. Some of these ideas, such as this one that we're talking about right now, that healing is 100% of the mind, some of them may come across as, well, to put it mildly, anathema to you. They may seem like an outlandish statement, like total bullshit. I don't know. If that's what you're thinking, that's what you're thinking. I don't mind. I'm bringing this up to illustrate a point, a very, very important point, that we need reinforcement and repetition as adult learners. We're all stubborn. I'm stubborn. We're all stubborn, are we not? We need these countless repetitions and restatements and seeing the same idea 20 different times, right, in the same language, and then seeing it another 25 times in different words, same idea, right? Same idea. Healing is of the mind. Now, when the mind begins to heal, you will know. How will you know? You will be experiencing life differently. You will experience situations differently. In my own experience, this has looked like opening up a gap between an event and my response to it, between stimulus and response. Typically, what we do in the world is without any training, mind training, which is what this is. It is that. Without any, what we do is we often go with our knee-jerk reactions and responses to a situation. Let's take an argument in a relationship. We've had those. I've had some of those. We've all had some of those. So let's take that as an example here to illustrate the point that, let's say someone habitually says something that gets your goat, that really triggers you, and they know it. So they say it without any training or practice in spirituality or mindfulness or whatever you call it. There's usually a very short gap in time between their saying something hateful and rude and your response to it. It's often instantaneous. Now, the purpose of mind training, meditation, by the way, mindfulness practices, prayer, devotions, congregation in a group to study spirituality, looking at spiritual texts online, reading them, all of that mind training, healing is of the mind. With this training, there becomes a gap, however slight at first. We open up a gap between stimulus and response, between someone's nasty statement and our own response to it. So rather than responding with hatred or our knee-jerk reaction that doesn't help because it leads to an argument, the more space we open up, the more time we have to make a different decision, and voila, everything is reframed. This is why so many world spiritual traditions focus on meditation and prayer and contemplation, so that we may open this gap of choice and decision for ourselves. And in that space and time that we appear to create, we can make a different decision. If you're following this course, we can forgive. One way of looking at healing, yes, it's of the mind. Any decision for love instead of fear is healing. Any shift, by the way, that's one way that this course defines a miracle, is any shift from the thought system of fear to the thought system of love, from fear to love, from the ego to God, from dark to light, anything. When you begin to gradually, as needed, accept the primacy of the mind, the fact that healing is of the mind, your experience will begin to change. As you open up this gap, you will notice yourself becoming more patient, won't you? You'll notice that you have more tools in your toolkit from your own practice, from your own decision that you want to see, that you want to heal, that you want things to be different, and your own acceptance of your central role in that. This is why A Course in Miracles emphasizes forgiveness in the certain way that it presents it, which, as we've seen in a number of videos, and something that I'll talk about quite a bit more often, is different than the way forgiveness is practiced here in the world. Starting with the truth that it, in order to be effective, it needs to be applied all the time. Now, that is where we must be deeply, deeply patient with ourselves, isn't it? So this is part one. I clearly have much to say. There's much to be said about this and every subject. So we're on question 5 here in the Manual for Teachers. How is healing accomplished? There's another segment completely that we will get to in the next video, which involves the role of the teacher. In other words, your role. So thank you, as always, for tuning in. And well, if what is said on this video startles you, perfect. It was meant to startle you. If you reject it categorically, no problem, right? Perfect. Yes, you were meant to reject it categorically. You were meant to puke it up and reject and walk away. On the other hand, if you know deep down that this makes sense somehow, if there is something you know and can feel, a part of you that wants to kick this idea around a little bit or a lot, so be it. You were meant to think about it, which is why this image on the screen is talking to you. It's why I appear to be here right now. Because having entertained, truly entertained ideas such as this once, we cannot help but bring our minds back to them. Hence the repetition. Hence the saying the same thing on many different days in many different ways. So, as always in these videos, take what resonates with you and think about it, but understand as well that merely intellectually understanding something is not where the action is. It is in the practical application to your life experience. That is where you begin to truly learn and come to grasp with these ideas, which may seem absolutely outlandish at first. We certainly weren't taught as children that healing is 100% of the mind. My dad's an orthopedic surgeon, and my mom was a critical care nurse. It's all about the body, right? You may have had a similar situation. So I invite you to tune in to that voice deep down that has led you here in the first place, that has caused you to think and take a look at your experience and all of the suffering in the world and think, oh man, there's got to be an easier way. There's got to be a better way, and there has to be a purpose behind all of this chaos. Well, you're right. There is. So, thank you for joining me on this path. As always, it's an honor to work with you, and I do invite all of your questions, comments. This is what I'm here for. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great day. We'll continue this idea. How is healing accomplished in the next video with some specific focus on the role of the teacher, which is your role.